Let's get straight to it. 2007 Hyundai Sonata. This is the 3.3 V6 engine. Today we are changing spark plugs and ignition coils. This is what your ignition coils should look like. And these are your spark plugs. Let's start with taking this cover off here. They're just 10 millimeters to get all these hardware out. After we get the cover up, we can see everything clearly that we need to get up. So getting this is going to be pretty easy, but getting the one on the back side isn't. We have to remove this entire intake manifold and all of this stuff here in order to get to the valve cover in the back, where the spark plugs and ignition coils are back there. That's why all of this has to come up for us to do this job. Let's start by getting this. This is a 10 millimeter or a flathead to loosen up these hose clamps. Let's remove this hose clamp here. And now we can twist this hose and remove it. Okay, so once we get that up, we can see down here. So there's normally a bolt right here for you to release this, and that way we don't have to remove this throttle body. It'll just come up on its own with the intake manifold. So there's normally a bolt right there, so make sure you remove that bolt. Someone already did me a favor and removed it for me, so we're just gonna go ahead and remove the throttle body and make it easier. It's just 3 10 millimeter bolts, real easy to get off. Usually it's 4, but this is 3. So let's just go ahead and remove this to make the job easier. Let's get those 10 millimeter bolts out. All right, so this is the reason why I removed the throttle body. So there's 2 lines on the back side of this that I don't want to have to remove. There's a line on this side here, and there's a line on this side. So it's easier to remove the throttle body, so you don't have to remove those lines. Otherwise, you won't be able to pick this intake manifold up with this throttle body connected without removing those 2 coolant lines. So we don't want to remove those. We can either remove this line down here from this hose clamp, or it's one up here. So I got this hose clamp down here now. So all I have to do is, I already used my flathead to pry this off. It was a little stuck up here. So once I use my flathead to pry this off a little bit, now it's loose enough for me to just wiggle that free, just like that. So now this is not connected anymore to any of these lines down here. So we can focus on getting everything else. Let's get a flathead to remove these, pull these safety tabs back on these ignition coils. And once that's back, we can press this tab down and pull these wires off, this harnesses off. We'll save these, we'll get these out last. I don't want anything to fall down in these holes. All I wanted to do was free some of this stuff up. All right, so let's start with a bunch of 10 millimeters so we can speed through this. You have these 2 right here that's holding on this bracket. You have these right here that's holding on this bracket. You have these two over here that's holding on this bracket. Let's set those out of the way. So this bracket here, you can see there's a tab. There's a tab that's going through there. If you clip both of these sides, squeeze both of these sides, you should be able to push that through there. Like that, to get that off. There's a harness right here to be removed from this vapor canister per solenoid. Then there's a hose. There's another harness right here. Let's get that off. So we can leave this purge canister up there. Okay, so there's two 10mm bolts on the back side of this. You can see there's one here and one there. Let's remove those. Okay, so that's one. I'm gonna go ahead and remove both of them for you. So this is where we remove the two 10mm bolts from. All right, so right on the back side of here, you can see that's a 14mm, and that also has to be removed. So let's get that off. Okay, so believe it or not, all the hard parts are done. So now we just have to get up the main bolts and nuts to get this off. So there's 1, 2 right here in the middle. And keep in mind where these long studs came from, so we can make sure they get right back where they belong. So there's a harness right here that needs to be removed. So once I can move this out of the way, now I can see 3 bolts that needs to be removed. There's one here, one there, and one here. Those are all 10mm bolts. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those up. Once again, remember where those bolts came from. So that's those 3 bolts there. And on the corners here, you can see there's 2 nuts. One on this side, and on this side here, there's one right here. So make sure we put all those somewhere we can remember. Now with those up, let's see if we can get this up. If not, we may have to remove something else. But let's see what we got with this. Look at that. Look at that. So we managed to get this whole thing to move. Now we can set that to the side like that. But I just want you guys to see. What we're working with here. So the only thing that's connected right now is this vacuum. We don't need to get that vacuum off at all. So I'm just gonna leave that on there. So once you get your manifold up, you can see your intake manifold gaskets right here. So we're gonna go ahead and take these out. That way we can see what they look like. Okay, so these are the old ones. So this is what the gaskets look like, obviously. These holes down here go directly on top of your valves. You don't want anything falling down in those holes. I could already see that some dust fell down there. So I'm gonna get a vacuum cleaner, a shop vac. And I have this one here that I jerry-rigged down to a smaller hose. So I can use this hose and get down in there and get everything out of these holes. So I'm gonna go ahead and start that. So after vacuuming all of this out, I did a quick inspection with a flashlight, a visual inspection to make sure nothing was sitting down there on top of those valves. So now I can cover up each of these cylinders with a clean shop towel or shop rag. These aren't huge holes, so I can just use shop towels that don't fall apart. Just cover each of these holes until it's time to put our valve cover back on. Then we'll remove those. Same thing we did on the other side, how we removed these harnesses here off of these ignition coils. I'm going to go back here and do the same exact thing. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get these ignition coils out, all 6 of them, now that we can access all of these. Let's pull these up. All right, so it's time to get these spark plugs out. I have my 5/8 spark plug socket and an extension. And if you have a boot in here, that's good to get the spark plug out. If there's no boot in there, you can use a magnet to get the spark plug out of the cylinders. So I'm going to start with the cylinders in the front, and I'm going to get all of these spark plugs out by going counterclockwise. All right, I got them all loose. Now I can go ahead and get these out with a magnet. Again, if you had a rubber in yours, then you won't need to use a magnet. And you can see there was a little oil on this. So that means that you can see down this cylinder, there was a little bit of oil leak. So it's a good thing that this valve cover gasket got changed as well. So these are all of the old plugs, and they definitely needed to be changed. So I got a couple of different ways that I get these spark plugs in there. I got an old boot that I kept. I use this to get all my spark plugs in. If you don't have something like this, then you can just use a magnet to slowly lower this down there, or just be careful, turn this and then guide it down and just release it and let it fall down. But I'm going to use this boot here to get all 6 of mine in, and I'll get them started turning, and then we'll go from there. So before we drop these down in here, we're going to put a little bit of anti-seize. So I'm going to show you how I normally put these in with my boot. So if you ever come across one of these boots, make sure you keep them instead of throwing them out, because they come in handy. And then once I feel it's threaded in, I just pull it up just like that, and the spark plug is gone. It's still down in there. I'm gonna do the same thing to this one. Just like that. Okay, so I got most of these snug down. So all I have to do now is just torque them with my ratchet. You want to make sure you're hand tighten these and don't use a impact. You can almost feel that brand new washer as it crushes, and you know when to stop. So we're just gonna drop these down in there. So now I'm gonna put the 3 in the back. All right, let's put our bolts inside of our ignition coils. And whatever I do to the front, I'm just gonna show the front. I'm gonna do the same exact thing to the back. That way this video don't have to be as long. Whatever I do to the front, just make sure you do to the back. All right, so I have all 6 ignition coils in. All right, so now's a good time to start putting these ignition coil plugs in. All right, so all the spark plugs and ignition coils are officially changed and reconnected. All right, so just take a look at these grooves. Make sure that there's nothing to clean out. And if your grooves are clean and debris free, don't worry about the oil. Just look for any debris or gasket material. And if it's clean, then it's time to put our new gaskets in here. So this is what your new gaskets should look like. So whenever you take these off, of course, you always want to put new gaskets on here. So the fact that we took this manifold off, of course, we're going to put brand new gaskets on it. We don't want to put the used gaskets on this that's already been crushed and used over the years. And these gaskets do a really good job of seating. So there's not much worry of these back and back out while you're trying to install. These ones here have ridges on them. You can see these ridges here. So if you want yours to go in as easy, make sure you get the ones with the ridges. All right, so now we're gonna clean up this gasket surface down here. So we got these rags down here. So I push them down just a little bit under the surface. That way, if anything falls while I'm trying to clean this, then it'll fall on top of the rag or the towel. So I'm also gonna use this vacuum at the same time as I clean this up. All right, so when you're done, the gasket area should look something like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just don't want to make sure you don't have any big pieces that's sticking up. It's going to get into the gasket area. So this right now is ready to go. And I also vacuumed down in the cylinders once I got the rags out. I vacuum on top of the rags first, then I pull the rags out and vacuum down in there. I'm actually leaving these cylinders cleaner than I found them. So you really want to make sure that nothing, and I mean nothing, gets down in here. So this is a really important part of this job. All right, so we're nice and seated. I haven't done anything else. I had to move this bracket in the back, further back, so I can get this to lay flat. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put these two large bolts in here. I'm just gonna get those tightened down a little bit, but not all the way tight. I just want to get them to where they're starting to thread in a little bit. So they're threading in pretty good now. So I know that I'm at least lined up. Now I can start to get other things around, like this right here. There's two bolts that go into this. Let's plug this harness back in here. All right, we'll put this nut right here, and then this nut here goes on the opposite side. So once again, I'm just hand tightening these. I'm not making anything all the way tight yet. Now you should have 3 medium-sized bolts. Those are the ones that go right here. Once I peel this back here, you can see where those bolts go. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop these 3 bolts in there. All right, so those 3 bolts that I just dropped down there, now I can use a ratchet and go ahead and tighten all 3 of these up. I'm not gonna tighten them all the way up. Once again, I'm just gonna put them at least a little bit snug. So I tightened up this one over here first, then the one over here, then this one, and then the 3 down there. And then I came back and I finished tightening all the way. The first was just a half tighten, so the last one was all the way tightened. I did the same exact sequence until I got all of these tightened down. Okay, so you have this bracket here that sets on top, and it goes over these holes just like that. And there's 2 bolts, 10mm bolts to hold these in. So let's get these pieces in. All right, so we got both of those tightened down. Let's plug some of our harnesses back in now. And then you have this vacuum line that goes right here. All right, so there goes the bracket there, and this is what it looks like once it's on. So I have the bottom down there attached to the motor, and I have the upper part here attached to the intake manifold in the back. So that is where that piece goes. And now this piece here simply just comes up here, and 2 10mm bolts go on top. Okay, so this hose that came off of this nipple here, let's go ahead and put that on before we forget about that. Just a simple hose clamp. I'm gonna put this hose clamp back on here. All right, so it's time to put the throttle body back on now that we have that hose on. And so I gotta say this first. If you see anything wrong with your gasket, your throttle body gasket, make sure you change it. Mine's is okay. I don't see any passages that seems to be leaking. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this throttle body back on. And remember, it's just 3 bolts to get this on. Just be careful not to get your gasket out of place while setting this back on. All right, so I got all 3 bolts in, and remember the bolt over here is the one that had the bracket attached to it. So I made sure to put that one back on the right side. So the throttle body itself is back on. And then also remember there was a bolt that goes here. There wasn't a bolt on here for me, but there should be one there for you. So remember to put that bolt back there as well. All right, it's time to get this tube back on. That's going to take care of this here, this nipple here. This part goes on that nipple. This goes there, and then this end goes here. So let's get that on. It's just 2 simple hose clamps. You can use a 10mm for these or a Phillips head screwdriver. All right, this part isn't the biggest deal, but on this plastic cover down here, we had 2 10mm bolts, one here and one down in there. So let's put those back in just to keep this plastic piece from moving around. All right, so the last bracket that needs to be put on here is this bracket right here. So basically you want to set this underneath just like that. And you can see the holes where the bolts go. So there's going to be, you put these 2 bolts in first, and then you can put these 2 bolts in the middle. So just like that, all 4 of these bolts are in now. So now when we put our cover on, we'll have some place to mount our cover. All right, so we got the cover back on, and that's pretty much it, guys. All we gotta do now is put our negative battery terminal back on and tighten that up with a 10 millimeter, and we are done.